Ever since the day the sheriff had come knocking on his door with a warrant to search his property, Jacob's life had been flipped upside down. The search had uncovered children's bones, and following the discovery, Jacob had been sentenced to death by execution. Douglas, Jacob's brother, had a plan to save Jacob. "I'm going to give you some morphine so you'll look like you're dead. Then I will pretend to bury you." Jacob wasn't sure about the plan, but what other choice did he have? He took the morphine. Jacob didn't know how long he had been out of it for. Could have been hours, could have been days. His head ached from the effects of the morphine. Slowly, he opened his eyes. He blinked, but he couldn't see a thing. It was pitch black. He tried to reach out, but he was surrounded by earth. He had no idea where he was. Slowly, his eyes became accustomed to the darkness. He turned his head and gave a sharp cry. He could feel his wife's hand in his. It was cold and undeniably lifeless. That's when the true horror of his situation hit him. He had been buried alive. Welcome back to SCP Exposed. Today we bring you the safe class subject, SCP-2632. But before I go on, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on any more SCP cases. SCP-2632 is to be contained in a standard humanoid containment cell on floor 7 of Site 88. He may not physically interact with any Foundation staff directly except while being restrained. SCP-2632 is a human individual that possesses unusual longevity and is unable to be harmed by any available means. Its aging appears to have stopped completely during its time in Foundation custody. He displays physical characteristics which are consistent with a 68-year-old male. Historical records indicate that SCP-2632 was born in 1810 in the Republic of West Florida. His name was Douglas Mangred. Observational evidence of SCP-2632, these historical records, and claims made by the entity itself indicate that the event which produced his anomalous effects occurred in 1878. He possesses no further anomalous properties and displays symptoms consistent with a diagnosis of relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, while additional permanent damage to his neurological condition appears to have been prevented by his anomalous properties. SCP-2632's behavior is consistent with an individual possessing a moderate state of neurological decay. SCP-2632 was recovered in 2003 following a botched execution attempt in the U.S. state of Washington. He was convicted in 1994 of killing Jonathan Garrett and sentenced to death. The individual refused to choose his execution method, and by state law was to be hanged in January of 2003. Due to 2632's anomalous properties, this penalty was ineffective. Agents embedded in the Washington State Department of Corrections were able to recover the individual following this attempt. On the 5th of February 2003, Dr. William Hoskins, the head of Project SCP-2632, conducted an interview with the subject. Dr. Hoskins was instructed to create a rapport with the subject to induce cooperation. The following is a transcript of the interview. "To be perfectly honest, I was hoping for life in prison," said SCP-2632. "Why?" asked Dr. Hoskins. SCP-2632 paused for several seconds, then continued. "I haven't told you how I got this way yet." "No, would you like to?" "That's been something I've needed to get off my chest for a while." "Well, I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. Let's talk." "Every time I've told someone about it, I've ended up killing them." SCP-2632 tapped on the glass partition, separating him from Dr. Hoskins, before continuing. "Don't think that's going to matter so much anymore, though. You ever been to Crossroads, Wyoming?" "No, I haven't." "Beautiful little town. At least it used to be. Moved out there with my wife and little brother in 1867. "Who were they?" "Bethany Manfred and Jacob Manfred. My brother was a fucking coward. Stayed out of the war. My wife's father and brothers died during Sherman's March. Her mama had died a few years back. She didn't have anywhere to go, so I picked her up." "And you went to Crossroads?" "Yeah. Jacob was going to help me set up an undertaker's business. Greedy son of a bitch had a good idea. We were burying a man every week." "And then?" "I started to get it into my head that we could do something about all the death and destruction. I promise you it was noble at first. Met an Indian in the saloon. I thought he was just talking crazy. But once I sobered him up, he told me about a ritual. He said he couldn't die. That got me interested." "What happened to the Indian?" "That's complicated. See, He told me about how he and 4 of his friends had enacted the ritual. Turns out, there was one catch. People who'd participated could hurt each other. It was the only way you could die. Okay, then what had happened to the others? He'd gotten paranoid, and that was that. He killed them, all of them. Right, so then you enacted the ritual as well? After a time. Took me a bit to get all the things together I needed. But the way the shakes was getting worse, I was trying to hurry. And then? Then I made the dumbest mistake I've made in a long, long time. I brought my brother and my wife in on the thing. So you all performed the ritual? I did most of the hard work. There were some unsavory bits I don't think either of them could have stomached. But when it was over, we all knew our whole world was different. What happened to your brother and your wife? She was 24 when we finished. He was 36 and I was 68. My body barely worked anymore, even if it wouldn't ever get worse. Exactly what you think happened is what happened. They began an affair? Right under my nose. I hadn't told them about the catch, so they didn't know that I could hurt them if I wanted to. And did you? Not at first, but you did eventually. What I did was take some of the children's bones I'd used in the ritual and planted them in Jacob's house. Then I paid the sheriff a lot of money to go do his job and search the place. What happened to your brother after that? Sheriff arrested him, the trial was short enough, sentenced him to hang the next week. I pretended like I was on his side, told him I'd give him a bit of morphine so he could fake being dead. And did you? Yeah, I laughed at the hanging. I was worried someone would notice. Could barely keep his head up. He was still sleeping afterwards when I carted him out to the hole in the ground I'd dug, 7 feet straight down. You buried him? I did. What did your wife do? She wasn't happy. She showed up at the grave as I was dumping him in, told me everything. She said when he woke up, they'd be leaving town for good. What did you do? I smashed her in the back of the head with a shovel and threw her in the hole. You buried them both? Yeah, her dad and him sleeping. He didn't wake up before I was done. What happened after that? I left town myself, nothing tying me down. Were you ever worried that your brother would wake up and dig his way out? Dirt has weight. He was stuck down there at the bottom for 120 years. 120? You said you moved to Crossroads in 1867. Yeah, see, I've been all over the world, but I always came back to Crossroads every once in a while. Some people might call it guilt, but honestly, I just needed to know that the one man who could hurt me was still in the ground. And he isn't? No, he isn't. What do you mean? Back in '92, I made another pilgrimage out there. They were building a shopping center over the old graveyard. Big old machines went in and dug the whole area up. Did they find your brother? They must have, because he found me. Never saw him. The coward caught me from behind. I ain't been hurt like that in a long time. I ran and ran. I still don't know why he let me go. What did you do after that? I went home and panicked. Figured the one sure way to avoid my fate was to sit in prison. So I headed out to Mount Rainier, killed the camper in Paradise, and sat next to the body until a hiker found me. Right. If I'd been smart, I'd have picked a state with no death penalty at all, but I messed that up too. Are you still worried about him coming for you? Not now. I don't think there's any way he could even know I'm here. Why do you think he wants to come for you? I mean, are you serious? Sure, just for the record. Can you imagine not being able to move, not being able to breathe, and not being able to scream for 120 years? Wouldn't that have driven him insane? Sure, I bet he went insane a few times down there and right back to sane again. There's nothing I can say to change his mind, probably not even angry anymore. He knows what I did and why I did it, and he won't stop until I'm hurt just as bad as he was. Alright, thank you for your time. I imagine we'll have more questions for you tomorrow. Fine by me. The following is an incident report written by Dr. Elizabeth Lane. Dr. Hoskins began to hold informal interviews with SCP-2632 in order to ascertain the specifics of the ritual which produced his anomalous abilities, and the eventual fate of the individual who first informed him of the ritual itself. These interviews were unsuccessful in their stated goals. On November 12, 2015, following 12 years of successful containment, SCP-2632 killed Dr. Hoskins during an unguarded interview. No future interviews are to take place without a barrier separating SCP-2632 from Foundation staff. A second incident report was written by Dr. Elizabeth Lane detailing the events of an interview held with SCP-2632. Following the death of Dr. Hoskins, a new project head was selected. Dr. Elizabeth Lane, the current SCP-2632 project head, was scheduled to interview the individual on December 18th. When she entered the interview chamber along with Agent Bill Cassidy, SCP-2632 began to suffer from what appeared to be a mental break. He was unable to answer any questions coherently and appeared to be unsuccessfully preoccupied with Agent Cassidy's presence. In order to facilitate a calming of the subject, Agent Cassidy will no longer be utilized as security for the project. Dr. Elizabeth Lane proposed the following revisions. Due to SCP-2632's uncooperative nature, mental state, and danger that he may pose to Foundation personnel, and the anomalous properties he possesses, it has been determined that the following actions are to be performed on December 20th, 2016, by order of the project head. The SCP-2632 project is to be reclassified as inactive. He will be restrained and placed on a steel platform. Exploiting its damage-resistant properties, a press will move a block of lead approximately SCP-2632 size downward until it molds into his shape. This press will keep it immobile until the reactivation of the project. SCP-2632's current project members will be reassigned to active projects, and his containment procedures are to be updated with these changes. On June 8, 2016, the Ethics Committee approved a proposal relating to SCP-2632 by Dr. Samirian. A search was made to determine the veracity of the SCP-2632 statements regarding his relatives. The burial site he described was found, and the body inside was exhumed. The remains were buried under approximately half a meter of soil, though it was clearly apparent that at least one previous occupant had either been removed or extricated itself from the burial site. Genetic indication indicates that this individual is strongly related to SCP-2632's still living descendants. Due to the sex of the individual in question, it is believed to be the remains of Jacob Mangred. The current whereabouts of Bethany Mangred are still unknown. What do you think of this SCP case? Please leave your comments down below.